following message is brought to you by Mike Koplitz. He is an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church and an ordained Messianic rabbi. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 7, verses 31 to 35, we have Jesus telling a parable to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, I should note that not all religious leaders did not believe in Jesus. Now, Nicodemus, who was a religious leader, believed in the message of hope and eternal life that Jesus had brought to the people. If you get a chance to watch the show The Chosen, you will soon discover that many of the common people like that message of hope and grace that Jesus offered. You will also be able to take note that many of the religious leaders of the time, a group called the Pharisees, they weren't interested in his message. There are scenes in the show where they show the high priest Caiaphas, who was not happy that the Galilean preacher was being listened to. Part of the concern was that Jews in Judea did not consider the Jews of the Galilee to be full-fledged Jews. They treated them the same way they treated the people who lived in Samaria. Now, Galilee and Samaria, they were a part of the northern kingdom called Israel. And when the Assyrian invasion occurred, the northern kingdom was conquered, and many of its inhabitants were located into different parts of the empire. Then the Assyrians brought people from outside of Israel to live in the land. The Assyrian method was to prevent rebellion, and it was to disperse people. By dispersing people, they can't rebel, and eventually their culture dies and their language will die over time. The people in the Galilee were Jewish descendants. When the Persians released the Jews from Babylonian captivity, they returned to the Galilee and Judea, and especially to Jerusalem. The Jews at the time were led by a man called Ezra, and he tells us too many people wanted to come to Jerusalem. He had to limit the influx because the city's public structures need to be totally rebuilt because, the Babylonians destroyed everything. So the Jewish leadership in Judea did not recognize the Jews in the Galilee as full-fledged brothers. When Nathanael was told about Jesus, that's in John's Gospel, by the way, he said, "What good can come from the Galilee?" Nathanael discovered how wrong he was and became a disciple of Jesus. Bruce Barton authored a wonderful book around 1925, and it was titled The Man Nobody Knows. This Christian book became the second best-selling book during the Depression, and that was in the 1930s, with the Bible taking first place. Barton described a happy Jesus who liked a good kosher party. Barton's Jesus smiled and helped people while he himself needed help. I highly recommend this book to you, and you know what? It's still in print today. That's how popular it is. John the Baptist, like others of his day, saw luxury as something that took a person away from God. Now, Jesus, on the other side, saw the luxuries as gifts from God. Let me say that a luxury to John was having 3 meals a day. He nor Jesus was referring to gold or silver or all these other high ends of luxury. If one had a home to sleep in, that person was a part of the luxury of that day. Now, this sounds crazy to us, but no, not in Jesus' day. So being at a dinner with friends was more than acceptable to Jesus, and it should be to us today. Because having that means you can hold a dinner party with your friends and share the gifts God gave you with other people. When they held a wedding in Jesus' day, the entire town took part in the party. Imagine how boring life would be if you took away all that fun. Jesus never said we needed to give up luxury items. He said we should share what we have with our neighbors. Jesus wanted each of us to have enough to live so that we don't become street beggars. Giving to charities that help people who are less fortunate, hey, that's a righteous thing to do. A part of receiving salvation and eternal life is to live in a way that imitates Jesus as much as possible. Of course, we have to evaluate things a bit differently today. And what that means is that Jesus did not expect automobiles and computers and those really cool gaming devices they have today. The significant feature of the gospel is that it's a living document which can connect the modern day ways with the ancient ways. You know that the two great commandments are to love God and love neighbor. These commandments never change, no matter what the world believes. Therefore, we can judge our words and actions against the two great commandments that Jesus gave us. You know, the sage Hillel, who lived about 70 years before Jesus, was asked how long would it take to learn the Torah. That's the first 5 books of the Bible. He said less than a minute, and while standing on one foot. He said, the Torah says, love God and love neighbor. Everything else is commentary. That's it. Love God, love neighbor. That's what it's all about. You know, Jesus is playing a flute for us. This means that he's calling us to become his disciples. He does this because he loves all humanity and wants us to join him in heaven. I would imagine that the heavenly dining room would be very empty if it wasn't for Jesus calling us to join him. As a disciple of Jesus Christ, we will spend our eternal life in heaven, sitting at a table in the dining hall of heaven. There we will see all the saints who came before us. So, following the sound of the flute, the voice of Christ, who calls you to be with him and to share many heavenly banquets with him. Join him, won't you?